Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Pietro Chiovaro and today it's going to be show you how to create this environment in Blender. For the creation of this project, I used the resources from Polyhaven, a website where you can find 3D models, materials, textures and HDRIs for free. If you want, you can support them through their Patreon. This video is not sponsored by Polyhaven, but I think it's a really good website that you should know about. So, from the Polyhaven website, I downloaded the following materials: 3D models and HDRIs, which I thought made to work well with the scene I was going to create. First of all, I started to create the side part of the canal. This one is based on Utrecht, one of the most famous canals in Netherlands. As you can see, on the right side of the viewport, I have some references, because the real first step was to check the environment on Google Maps, take some screenshots, and then import them in Blender, because when you create environments, character, or basically anything, you should always have a reference aside in order to create everything the proper way with the proper proportion. So make sure to check the environments that you want to create on the internet, take some reference, and then you are good to go. That being said, while creating this sort of lookout of the scene, I started to create the UV map in order to be able to apply the materials and check how they look. Once again, it is really important to check the reference, to see what is missing, fix the scale, the proportion, and so on. The material that I applied over here are the one from Polyhaven, but instead of importing each texture one by one with the Wrangler node or anything like that, I just imported the Blender file that I downloaded from Polyhaven and I placed it inside my Blender usual library. So as soon as I marked the element as a library items, it was showing up in Blender. The good thing about it is that in this way it's really easy and fast to apply materials and import models in Blender. The only thing that I noticed is that when you import a model or even a materials multiple times in different objects, Blender keeps creating a new instance of the material, even though it's basically the same. So at some point I was having like brick 1, brick 2, brick 3 and so on, even though it was basically the same material. So make sure to fix them and remove the unnecessary materials to not mess up your project. Right after, I did the canals and I used a plane to represent the river. I started the creation of the bridge, dividing a half cycle and extruding this half cycle to create the arch. And then, using a cube, I created the other part of the bridge, so the base and the floor, being able to reduce the poly count and optimizing the scene and having even better performance while running the project or rendering the project. So as you can see here, the polygon consume is really low. In order to look more realistic, one of the things that I did was to bevel the edge. So I selected the edge of the floor, of the side wall of the bridge, and then I press Ctrl B in order to bevel the edge. After that, I created some simple UV map and applied the materials. By using the add-on import images as plans, I imported another sort of reference image that I created. The scope was to bring the buildings of the city in the project. So after that, I took some screenshot from Google Maps. I removed the sky in Photoshop, making sure it was alpha transparent, and then I exported this sort of buildings line texture in Blender as a PNG image. This is a pretty simple method, especially used on movies and television production. The result is effective and is perfect to give context to an environment. Usually, when you use this method, the elements has to be placed in front, like with a sort of parallelism between the shot and the element. But in this case, I have to place the buildings aside of the canals. So one of the problems was to solve was to make these elements look like 3D and not like a flat plane with a texture applied. So in order to create this sort of illusion, what I did was to apply a ray modifier in order to have like a sort of duplication of the plane of the building of this texture and create a sort of parallax effect. At the end, the result was really good. It was like something that don't require a lot of details, so from the distance, with the motion blur, ambient occlusion, all the other effects, is something that you cannot notice, but it was doing the job in the proper way, and the overall effect at the end is really good. Focusing even more on the other elements of the canal, I created the fence and the light poles of the street. Even this time, the role of the reference was really important to create the model in a quick and easy way. All the process here were just part of the extruding, adding circle, really simple shape geometries, and extrude those elements following the reference. By using this method of import images as plans and reference, I was even able to recreate a module for the base of the side of the canal. And one of the things that I noticed in relation of the material from polyethylene and the actual material, the actual brick that is in Utrecht in the canal, is that the brick that I was using was a bit too much saturated. So one of the things here was to fix the saturation of the material in relation to the reference. One of the elements that can help us to bring a bit more realism, storytelling, and help us to actually blend together elements is the use of decal textures. So in this case I used some of mine from my library because there are no decals on polyethylene at the moment, at least. and I placed like this sort of leaf that lives in the floor, on the water, even some crack on the wall, on the concrete, on the brick, and even this kind of stains. All these elements here are part of our world, and so if we are able to bring it in our scene, we can bring a bit of this realism. Is even a really cool way to actually blend maybe some edge of the models that don't look really good. I mean, it is a really important part of the process. So always spend time to place some decals in your scene. And finally, I started the part that I loved in the 3D production, the lighting. Lighting is usually one of the most complex part in the environmental creation, not because of the technical part behind it, even though it's really important, but because you have to have a clear idea about what you want your scene to look. You can make it more romantic, like on movies, or even like a more dramatic. Lighting is pretty much one of the most important elements in 3D. So in this case, my idea was to make this environment look a bit more dark, a bit more mysterious, with this kind of fog elements. First of all, I started placing some point lights nearby the light poles to get an idea of the general mood in the real life, and then I set up even one of the 3D array from Polyhaven. The idea was to create some kind of cloudy nights of November, so I created a cube and applied a simple basic volume shader to add a bit of density in some part of the area of the environment. Once that all those elements were placed, the idea, the mood was a bit more clear to me, and I was even able to get a bit of the emphasis that I want to bring in the environment. Those trees, once again, are from Polyhaven. They use a sort of geometry node development, so actually you can even extrude some branches and get some leaves on them. I mean, are really good models and really well done. So once this part of the process was done, I kept working on the set dressing of the canal by placing the other models I got from Polyhaven. From now on, the entire process was just to place elements, 3D models, making sure that everything was looking real in the right place. I spent really most of the time checking references, doing multiple renders, and moving the models by literally centimeters to make sure that the environment was realistic as much as possible and like in my mind. So with the same mood, with the same characteristic that I was thinking to bring in the render. Once that everything was in place, with the proper lighting, proper elements, proper decal placement, proper material reflections and everything, all that was missing was the camera movement, the shot that you saw at the beginning, the final render basically. And to do that, I just selected the camera, defined just the direction that it was going to follow, and then in order to boost the camera effect, since my idea was to create like a sort of video taken by a phone by someone walking in the canal, I was able to achieve this effect using the add-on Camera Shakify that you can find on GitHub. So I just defined the animation, I set the keyframes, and then I hit on Add Camera Shakify. I just decreased a bit the intensity of the movements, and then I hit on Ctrl F12 in order to render the animation. Of course, you may have noticed that I haven't talked about the fallen leaves and the water shader that is part of this video, and that's because I think they deserve a full tutorial step by step. In this video it was more like an explanation of my workflow, but those elements, the shader, water shader, and the actual particle system of the fallen leaves, I think require more time in order even to explain you all the steps of the things that I'm doing. So stay tuned and subscribe to the channel to not miss this upcoming video. In the meantime, let me know your thoughts in the comment section and leave a like if you enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching and see you soon.